Hi, and welcome to Faith in an Ever Changing World Encouragement and Hope Faith Story. I'm Janet Harley, your host. And today, please welcome with me Cherie Nettles. Cherie Nettles is a comedian, humorist storyteller, certified laughter leader, Bible teacher, motivational speaker, and writer. She's been entertaining and warming hearts for 16 years with her lighthearted humor and motivational messages. Cherie says that she's a hilarious overcomer and has learned that sorrow brings sickness while joy brings healing. And I love that, Cherie. Oh, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Janet, it is my blessing and honor to be here with you
Yeah,
today. I am
yeah,
just so excited. But Janet, right before we get started, can I tell you something real fast?
sure.
You can't see all of me, but this is great news. Do you know that since August of 2012, I have dropped 126.4 pounds? So give it up for me.
Woo! Yay! Praise the Lord for that. Honest, that is wonderful.
Well,
And boy,
Janet, that's when I dropped my daughter off at college, but it's what she weighs. Okay.
oh,
Doesn't that count, Janet? Does it
oh,
still count?
yeah,
Yeah.
sure it does. Sure it does.
She hasn't she
Bless
hasn't
you,
moved back
girl.
home. Yeah, she hasn't moved back home, so I feel like it still counts.
That is great. That's great. Oh my goodness. Well, Cherie, we were talking just before we went on, and both of us started freezing up a little bit. But if we do that, she lives in South Carolina. I'm in North Carolina, and where we live, it is raining. So it does have an effect on our internet. So that'll be the reason we'll be freezing up a bit.
It
But we're
does.
going to try to stay as still as we possibly can, but we might forget. We might forget.
I need a
Okay.
stapler just right back here
Yeah.
because I'm moving it's right back here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Cherie, if you will, please share your faith story with us.
Janet, I'd be honored to. First of all, my faith story begins in the beginning. I was born right here in West Columbia, South Carolina. I haven't moved from my hometown but a few years in my lifetime, and we came back here to bring our children up, and we've just been blessed to do that, my husband and I. But anyway, I was born into a home where there were addiction problems, and I don't need to camp there because Jesus Christ is the one and only, and He is our healer. But there were addiction problems. Our father left us very young when I was 2. And to say my childhood is rocky is a little bit of an understatement. So we'll use tumultuous, and then we'll jump to being 17. When I was 17, now let me tell you about my role. My role in the family was, when you have all that going on, everybody has their own roles. So
Yeah.
I acted as the mother and the
Mm,
one that went out and succeeded. I was what
mm.
I've named the trophy child. And so I became popular. I became well liked. I was even voted best all around in my high school senior class.
Huh.
There weren't but 2 people in my class, but I still got it. And anyway, so Janet, then I went, so at 17, I began to notice that I'm starting to feel really bad. And
Mhm.
what was going on in my right foot. I'd had a very minor injury, but needless to say, that injury turned out to be rheumatoid arthritis. And when I was 19 years
Yeah.
old, I was
Mm.
told by the time I was 21, I would live my life out of a wheelchair in chronic pain.
Oh my.
Well, no,
Mm.
look, now that I'm 29, we both see that that's not, don't laugh right there, okay? But no,
Right.
Janet, I'm
That's
59.
right. Praise God.
I'm 59 and I'm still walking because I believe God said He didn't get that memo. So to any to anyone out there that's struggling today, can I just assure you that we always want good doctors. We always want wisdom to surround us, but
Right.
we do not need to make health and medical science our God.
Mm,
Yahweh is our God.
mm.
And while man can give a great diagnosis, only God can give a true prognosis.
Yes.
So here I am.
A
All
great
these,
physician.
yeah, he is the great physician. All these years later, I am still walking. And as a matter of fact, I say before I walk up on a stage or a pulpit or where I'm speaking, I say that with my limp from my disease, I say that God has authenticated me before I even step behind the microphone. So God truly does take the ashes of our lives and form beauty. And that is the one thing I want every listener to know today. So you want me to jump in the rest, or you want to interject just a little bit here,
No,
Janet?
you go right ahead. Go right
You want
ahead.
me to go? All right, because there's a little bit more, Janet.
Go.
And so I was out publicly. I was a Bible teacher. And while I was teaching the Bible, I was loving it. I started in Sunday school. And the next thing I knew, a women's ministry group said, "Hey, would you come teach at our next women's event?" And I said, "Certainly." And they said, "We'll feed you." Well, I'm Southern Baptist.
Right.
Said, "I'll come." Then I graduated to a cookbook. How about that? Every time I'd go, I'd get a cookbook. And then I graduated to gift baskets, and eventually God had me graduate to paychecks. And so I was teaching the Bible, and some very sweet, beloved people. I'm going to go ahead and say one of them, Joy Brown, one of my mentors, said to me, "Cherie, you're funny. You should consider Christian comedy." And I leaned over, really seriously, just like this, Janet, at that event. And I went, "I will never do Christian comedy."
Never say never.
God didn't get that memo either. So if you've ever wrestled with telling God what to do, I'm going to fast track you. He wins every single solitary time. Okay? So,
he does.
To make my long story short, because what I can really do is I'm so good, and I'm going to do my hands, I'm so good at taking this really short story, Janet, and making it so long. I mean, that's my spiritual gift. If anybody wants to know it, ask my husband. He'll tell you. Janet.
Absolutely.
Anyway, yes. Anyway, so I was teaching the Bible. God had me out in itinerant ministry. I'd worked with teams of women. I'd worked alone. And at 40 years old, I was heading to a women's conference, but I'd noticed for the few weeks prior that I'd had an unusual pressure on my right side. I didn't think anything about it because I thought, well, I've probably got a bladder infection, female, whatever. I've had 2 children. The old gray mare ain't what she used to be. And don't say that at 40. Yeah, don't say that at 40. While it might be a little bit more true at 59, that's not true at 40. But anyway, so if you're 40 out there, girls, just go have fun. You're young, okay? You're young.
Yeah, they are. Yes, 40 is very young.
40 is very young. 40 is the new 20 because 60 is the new 40. Did y'all know that? Someone just needs to convince my skin of that statement, okay? Because the elasticity, okay?
It does change.
It changes a little bit. I told you at the beginning, I don't know where I picked these bags up. I didn't want these bags under my eyes. I don't know where I bought these. I guess they don't have a receipt to return them. But anyway, so I began noticing this unusual pressure, and it got to where I was having to go to the restroom frequently. I had a chronic indigestion, but all of these things, my pants were a little bit tight, so I had one of those little scrunchies, and I'd wrap it around my button of my pants, and I'd pull it through the loop, and it'd work. And can I just tell you, ladies, nobody knows your body better than you do. So if something persists for longer than 2 weeks, you need to tell your doctor. And if he doesn't listen, guess what? You need to go find a new doctor. So anyway, my doctor, being the great doctor that he is, he listened. So to make that long story short, I ended up in the hospital having surgery. They said I had benign mass on my uterus, which actually turned out to be a malignant mass on my right ovary that had spread to my left ovary. Janet, it looked like somebody had taken hundreds of a pepper shaker, shaken it in my pelvic area where there were hundreds of cancerous cells. It had gone into my stomach my omentum was, they biopsied 47 suspicious places. My omentum was cancerous. He took that top fat layer out. He left the other 7 fat layers and calls himself a surgeon. But we won't talk about that today, okay? Yeah. That was a joke. Anyway, I think I'm getting too serious now. I need to lighten it up.
I know.
But Janet, what happened from there is I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. I was a class 3B
So
ovarian cancer.
sorry.
Can I tell
Yeah.
you today, ladies, that cancer, COVID, disease is not the worst thing you can hear. The worst thing that you could ever hear is that God changed his mind. And you know what? Because of who he is, God will never change his mind.
Yeah.
And he loves you exactly like you are.
Yeah.
But he also loves us too much to leave us that way. So let's go back to the comedy thing, okay?
Yeah.
But needless to say, I began to beg God for a word because the doctor told my husband, he said, Mike, my husband asked how long, of course, the question, how long? Doctor told him 10 years so we could see both of our children graduate high school. They were 8 and 11 at the time. And he said, but 5 years is her prognosis. And he said, Mike, he took his shoulder in my best friend's hand. He said, Cheries disease is so aggressive that over the next 90 days, you need to get your house in order. 90 days. Janet, 90 days.
Wow.
I think they were trying to figure out where I was hiding all my chocolate in the house. I don't know.
Maybe something.
I don't know. But 90 days. And I began to beg God for a word and to move through this, not to take up too much time right here, to move through this. I began to beg God for a word. Being desperate for God is a great place to be because there you will always find him. Because the 23rd Psalm says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me.
Yes.
And so what ended up happening, Janet, is I began to beg God for a word. On November the 5th, 2002, my husband left the hospital room like he did every night at 9 p.m. to relieve our friends at our house, taking care of our kids. And at 11 o'clock that night, he called me. He said, sweetheart, I got your word from God. He had been reading me a psalm a day. And he said, Cherie, sweetheart, it's Psalm 86. I want you to read it. Good night. I love you. And being the journaler that I am, I've written a book, and that's nothing but my journals. Being the journaler that I am, I pulled my Bible to my bed tray. I pulled my journal, and I began to read Psalm 86 and journal it with my own name. Because, Janet, Jeremiah 29:11 says, for I know the plans that God has for Janet. They are not to harm her, but they are to prosper her. They are to give her a hope and a future. So I began to journal Psalm 86. And one of the verses literally says, save your servant from the depths of the grave. And I literally wrote, Daddy, save your girl from the depths of the grave right here. And so, Janet, I drifted off to sleep at about 11:30 p.m., I would guess. And I woke up at 4 o'clock a.m. to God's beautiful, still, quiet voice. And he said, Cherie, be confident in me and be at peace, for there's no more cancer. Janet, I put my head back on my pillow and I began to revel in God's word. And he said, you won't rest until you write it. So I pulled that journal up to my bedside table where my Bible already was. I wrote 11:6:02 at 4 a.m. God said, be confident in me and be at peace, for there's no more cancer. And Janet, the next thing I heard was, because I drifted off to sleep. Janet, sound asleep. Sound asleep.
Sleep in peace.
I was still medicated. Anyway, and so we'd have world peace tomorrow if we could hook everybody up to that IV. But sorry. Anyway, I'm not supposed to say and I just did because I just made one of those jokes I shouldn't have made, but that's okay. Hashtag, he's still working on me. But Janet, at 6 o'clock a.m., my doctor, Dr. Sidney Terry Smith, came flying through my room and said, oh boy, Cherie, have I got good news for you. He scooched up on my bed right beside me. Janet, I hate it when our hair's a mess and a good-looking doctor is just scooching right up beside you.
Bad hair.
And he's sitting bad hair. And he said, I sent all your slides off to Massachusetts Research Hospital. And late last night, what you want to bet it was somewhere between 11 and 11:30, he said, my friend, we call him Dr. Rogers, we call him the guru of pathology. I went to med school with him, called me and asked why I was going to treat you with such aggressive chemo. And I explained to him that your children were 8 and 11. And he said,
Oh.
you missed it. Her tumor was non-invasive, which means it can't spread. So when I took her tumor out, she was healed. I didn't say, Dr. Smith, what about the hundreds? I looked at him and I said, Dr. Smith, I don't mean to burst your bubble, but can I read you my journal? And, and I began to read to him that God had said at 4 a.m. that very morning, be confident in me and be at peace, for there's no more cancer. Ooh. And he leaned over, Janet, he kissed my cheek. Oh. I had to pay for that kiss. I'm just telling you, I did. Anyway,
I know.
Kissed my cheek.
Yeah. Expensive.
And he said, my child, God has smiled upon you.
Oh.
And today, 20 years later, this, excuse me, this year, with no treatment, with no chemo, no radiation, no additional surgery, I remain cancer free. To God be the glory, Janet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bless you. And I have watched some of your comedy videos and your speaking, and you're just awesome. You really are. And just God bless you, and may he continue to give you opportunities to share this.
Janet, thank you. What actually happened is I recognized from my deathbed that flopping in front of an audience kind of paled in comparison. And I also decided if I'm ever in a Baptist church and I flop, I'll just talk about him in the Methodist church. They'll love it. That's what I'll do.
That's right. That's exactly right. You got it. You got it. Well, now, you had mentioned to me before we went live, there is a Christian storyteller camp in January that you're going to be teaching. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Janet, I can. I'm stepping out on a limb right here. I'm stepping out on a ledge. And I don't think God's, you know what? Do you love? It's a magic trick. If I can pull a rabbit out of my ear, it'll really go off very well.
Yeah.
Jan, I don't know, maybe it's my earrings, but I am not taking my earrings and my lipstick off. I'm not. Janet, I am gonna kind of jumping off that ledge, and I'm gonna trust God. I think he's pushing me off the ledge. But in January in Columbia, South Carolina, I'm going to hold a Christian storytellers camp. And I believe that all good stories we learn in middle school have 5 elements. I believe that all stories for the kingdom have 6 elements. So I would love for anyone listening to contact me. You've got my information right there, don't you, Janet?
I do. Yes. CherieNettles.com or CherieNettles.net. And I will actually put that link in the comments section after the broadcast.
I would love for you to do that.
Yes. Yes. Cherie, thank you so very much. It's just been a joy to have you on as a guest today, and sharing the laughter and your story. And I just appreciate it so much.
Janet, I am so blessed and so honored to have met you. You're doing great things right here. Keep it up. And can I give a shout out to the person that connected us?
Sure. Absolutely.
Hey, Kelly Swanson.
Kelly,
we think you're the greatest and we love you. So Janet,
absolutely.
I will thank our God every time I remember you. Great to meet you.
Thank you. And I will certainly do the same for you. Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching. Have faith and look up, friends, where our help comes from. Bye. God bless.